Namaskar and welcome to this exciting show, Sathology Debunking Mythology. We have very prominent guest with us who has enlightened us many times in the past, spoken with us on various issues. So today we are going to speak to him on many issues. Number one is on the US politics, where yesterday you saw the vice presidential debate, and it's a very divided outcome. Some of we we support on both sides. So we have seen, you know, if some people say Mike Pence won and some people say Kamala Harris won. So let's see who won according to the Indian viewpoint. And the secondly, what are the priorities for America and India as a world global power? So looking forward to this discussion. Let's welcome Shri Ratan Shardaji. Namaskar. So it has been a wild election season for North America. It's like the people are tired of it because it seems that the campaigning never ended in 2016. That's a general feeling. So do you also feel the same in India there?
See, though Trump and Modi are very different people, they have very different background, very different way of governing. And but there is one thing which is similar is that the way the opposition behaves with these people who have been elected by their own people, they cannot tolerate anybody if it is the person is not from their camp. So this kind of intolerance to the other side, which has won the election fair and square, and continuously harassing that person all through the person's leadership, is common between the two. Although there are many other differences, and there is no comparison between the two in terms of their politics. But that is sure that this intolerance of the left and the left and so-called liberal Marxist class is very intolerant to any other viewpoint. So this talk of plurality and this talk of right to dissent, etc., stands nowhere. Today, just before I was on this show, I got delayed because one of the most prominent channels, the number one channel today in India, Republic TV, editor has again been summoned, and again there is a case against him saying that he manipulated TRP. And the complaint on which this particular debate started doesn't even name the TV channel. So, because of political pressure, even they have gone to that level to somehow put down a person who has risen from for his own hard work. So this is true of Modi, this is true of any other viewpoint which does not match the worldview of these so-called liberals.
The most important thing is, in what we have seen in the US is the inconceivable left thinks of themselves as the victim, the aggressor, they're the judge and the juror. It's like there is no chance for people who are even not interested in politics. Even they are getting polarized.
As I said earlier, communism is as exclusivist a religion as any Abrahamic religion. So either you believe in that religion, if you don't believe, you can be killed, you can be thrown out. You have seen China, you have seen Russia. You have no place in the society if you don't agree. That's the whole point. So this is the basic fascist philosophy of communist religion. So that is the reason why once they feel they are on the losing wicket, they'll go to any extent. In India, I've seen the incidents happening all these years, how since Modi has come, how they're trying to create unrest, they're trying to create anarchy at any cost. That is very clear. Same the way Trump has been harassed now. Okay, COVID is something where his test proved to be bad, where he was not really did not do well by his pronouncements. I agree with that. But beyond that, and because of which the economy also is in a bad shape, he was doing quite well for America. You may not agree with his viewpoint on many issues. You may find his style, jarring for many people. But he delivered to America. That was important. Reagan was similarly, put down, and he brought America as a revival. We should agree to that. COVID is something which has not spared anybody. It has destroyed employment. It has created havoc in the entire global ecosystem. There is no doubt about it. Apart from that, and his pronouncements which were not really good, and his own getting infected by COVID tells us that he was not on the line the way the rallies were held. But apart from that, he delivered. So once you accept it delivered, then you can argue, you can fight, but you cannot create an atmosphere when anybody who supports him is a buffoon, is an idiot who has no intellect. This kind of approach is what puts people off. That is happening in India. That is happening irreversibly.
See, one of the things which has happened during the last debate and
If you
now.
remember, now just to add, Black Lives Matter, how did it end up with the Marxist people? The case was horrendous case of racism, but how did it end up as a violent movement? How did it end up with attacking Indians, attacking natives, attacking every kind of person who had something with him, some shop, some small business? On what ground? And they are justifying, the Democrats today are justifying. By nature, most Indians may love Democrats by the tradition, but their defense of this violence is not acceptable in democracy.
It's you hit the nail point, and it's so thank you for that, Ratanji, because it's such a curse on the mindset, free mindset of American enterprise. Now there are many coffee shops in Seattle were burned down. Many Seattle is the home of many famous coffee shops, including
Yeah.
Starbucks, and they were burned down. And till date, there is no insurances covering them, and many of the insurances are giving up on them because the claims are high, and the secondly it was a state's responsibility to protect, and the state in a way looked the other way. Instead of that, they worked on defunding the police.
But then our system is better. We have got insurance for riots also. So in a way, we are better off than US.
In a way, yes. So you also in like today you mentioned about the TRP case which is going on in India. TRPs are first in the US from last 50 years. That's why newspapers like New York Post, New York Times, Washington Post, I have not met anybody, and including I had a survey done, at least
With
50,000 people
them.
responded. Nobody has ever subscribed to them. And still we have journalists coming from India claiming themselves to be a Washington Post journalist, or it's been a real corruption in a way, the TRP industry, even in the US. And to some extent, even in the university rankings, there is a fudging over there. Because in the US, when you pay the money, there are fees for many organizations are there where you can pay $5,000 and you can be the number one channel of the country. It's very simple. So
Just
now,
like, in India, every channel, every social organization is now giving film awards to various films and various actors. So they will give the award on the condition that those people will come and dance on the stage and do something else for them. So it's purely an exercise in PR. It's purely an exercise in self gratification. That's what is happening for the news channels also. The way they attack opponents. See, I have seen very vicious times in India. I have seen when the non-left was not at all entertained in any TV channel on any political platform. Then after 2012-13, when they realized things are changing, they started entertaining people like us. And then as the tide changed, I saw such intolerance in the debates. If you don't take the line they wish you to take, they will not call you again on the TV panel. And the kind of language that is used, the kind of language our left and liberal class uses, as if only they have got intellect, nobody else, is becoming humorous and also very. You feel very, feel very funny that these people have this strange notion of what is right, and that's exclusive right. As I said, typical totalitarian fascist approach, exclusive approach to politics, to ideology, to religion, everything. So world is changing. I do not know whether Trump will win or not, especially after this he's falling sick. But whichever way it goes, America is also in for a very trying time in terms of clash of ideas, clash of civilization, and not just civilization in the sense, religious civilization. I'm talking of the very worldview, whether you want a plural democratic society, which America professed, or you want to be doctored and controlled by a few intellect heads sitting somewhere in universities, the way our government in the UPA days was being controlled by a few Marxists and communists from sitting in academic seats or somewhere else. It is no more a democracy than because meritocracy of people who believe they are merited to respond. So that is the battle you have ahead of you.
that is true. So high, so well said. I think it has been recognized in the top echelons of the power as well. So last week, the administration passed a rule to control these leftist institutions and the funding of them. So,
I
but
heard they are controlling visa rolls also, so no communist can get a visa in US now.
yes, they might be doing that shortly, but a lot of laws are there. Now, coming back to the topic that we were discussing, that about the American exceptionalism or American innovativeness, many American firms are now questioned on or directed towards a very imaginary type of innovation. Now, for example, New Green Deal. Now, this is a since we have known that most of the times American innovations have been funded by the state. But when we talk about the Green New Deal, which is like a $3 trillion investment, and they don't know where they're going to invest. So all this money is going to flow to very party affiliated innovators. So so Democrats want to push their own deal because they have their own set of entrepreneurs, and the origin where that money ends up through these companies is a big concern now, and that will be the state funded money. Now that is going to create a different type of USA, which the world had never seen before. Like for example, Americans were known for machinery. I mean, they created some of the best fighter jets, some of the best warships, some of the best missiles, and also some of the best technology they put for civilian use, like internet. And they did that. But now with this new investment push for the climate protection, which is almost $31 trillion, $31 trillion is the total expenditure if it gets approved. But what is going to stop down is going to stop the mining, is going to stop the fracking industry. So entire the oil and petroleum will be defunded to a large extent, and everything solar and natural gas. It looks very good, but to change an economy with a big bang approach, is going to have some repercussions on the slowdown of American economy. What do you have to say on that? Because this contrast to that is Indian Atmanirbharta movement by the Prime Minister Modi. And Atmanirbharta is a great concept, but how does it compare between the two?
If you see the Indian approach to environmental changes, Modi ji has been very proactive. The way he turned around the entire environmental debate by putting up an alliance of countries for solar energy, which has been very successful. India has taken onus of changing from highly greenhouse, impactful industries to green industries, whether it's power, whether it's any other field. So India has taken a lot of steps to control environmental degradation, even though it's comparatively very small economy in terms of wealth, in terms of per capita income, but it is proactive. America with hardly 8% of the world population consuming 33% of the energy is something that people cannot understand. Maybe 28% now, and the total refusal to go by the UN Charter is also not appreciated by people. We appreciate America, we appreciate US innovativeness, but when the world is facing such a serious challenge and every country is being asked by the UN or whatever is standard today, whatever we can talk about it, and nearly every country agrees, you cannot have a few countries like China or USA saying that we will not agree, others should pay for what they are doing. If you remember, the developing economies are very small, and the entire industry was actually destroyed by the so-called industrialized countries at a very heavy cost for the environment. But now penalty is being asked to be paid by the other countries like India and many other small countries, while they are on the height of growth now. Despite that, India has taken up the challenge. So America will have to change. Whether it goes totally revolutionized the way everything is going on, whether it will go step by step, but first of all, let us accept that it will reduce that environment emission. It will reduce this. So far, they have not even agreed to agreed to those standards. That is the problem. It is not the speed at which you do it. But if the Earth suffers, even USA suffers. Isn't it facing the most dangerous natural disasters that has faced earlier on? It is. So we cannot shy away. The amount of money that is being put into California fires or into floods and tornadoes that every state is facing, does that amount not justify changing your way you produce things? You need to. How, at what speed? But first of all, US has to realize that it must step in with other countries. It cannot be, just being a world in itself, because after all, we are all connected together. Your own native saying goes that we are all related. If we are all related, If there is a butterfly effect in the world, naturally, what America does affects India, what India does affects China, and we have to, agree to that. Speed can be debated, but you cannot say we will not change because we the way we are. The amount of wastage that is built in American economy is legendary. I've gone there, seen how things are wasted. So the wastage has to stop. That is where Modi model is much more successful, much more inspirational than what US has done so far. So I will not go by your thought that what happens to USA. USA has to think of something new. It has to think of new steps to be in march to march with the time and see to it that somehow we can rescue the Mother Earth.
This climate debate has been a big topic with various American politicians, and generally Indian society and the social culture is such that they are naturally environmentally friendly. The
Yes,
reuse of resources in India is tremendously high, and which is very contrast to American way of life,
yes.
which is also now questionable in many ways because the eating habits and also the personal
I'll give a
hygiene.
small example.
Yeah.
Why should a 500 ml Coke should be as costly as a 2-liter Coke? Why should always buy a big size? Why there is no small size? What happens to a single user? My son was there and during his training for the for his flight training, and we would tell that when I went there, we saw throwing a lot of things. He said it has expired, but we cannot get a smaller size, so we have to have bigger size. We cannot consume, so we have to throw. So we have to go back to Indian thought process. We have to go back to the traditional Indian thought process, which is good for everybody. Why produce more than you consume? Why create something which has to be thrown away? This entire idea of disposables and everything is disposable, throwable, and always have more than what you require will have to go. As RSS Chief Sudarshan ji used to say, if we were to go by US standards of consumption, we would need 8 Earths to create that kind of material.
That's right.
And that is a fact. So whether you believe in environment or not, whether you believe whether it's Earth global warming or not, but these are hard facts. Resources are limited, isn't it? All
Correct.
said and done, resources are limited. Ultimately, you're depending on sun. You are depending on petrochemicals, which has taken millions of years to create that kind of energy. After all, when you produce solar energy, you still require some other energy. You require that petrochemical to create those cells, those voltaic cells. So, having understood that, we have to go back to conserving and to limit our wasteful way of living. That is what India needs to present to others in the world.
Now, you mentioned the batteries, and disposing of batteries is a big issue. It's like almost like a
Yes.
nuclear waste.
Today talks about it.
Nobody has spoken about it.
Yes. I
and
went to
and
China. Chinese people told me, okay, sir, it's fine that we are having batteries, battery run scooters, but nobody has yet thought what will happen to those batteries after 20 years.
correct.
Millions of batteries. Can you imagine?
Yeah. At least in the fossil fuel based fuels, it burns out into carbon dioxide and water. But in case of chemicals, these chemicals stay alive for a large generation of life,
And very
20.
toxic chemicals.
Very
Very
toxic.
toxic chemicals.
Very
I
toxic.
was
Like,
just hearing a news someday back that Germany is trying to find place to dispose of its nuclear waste of the for the power stations. They
correct.
can't find a place yet.
Yeah, because nuclear waste has to go into the earth, cannot be put
Yeah.
in water.
Yeah.
Similarly, the chemical waste of batteries, just imagine if the entire USA turns into a battery operated cars in 30 years. California just passed a law,
Yeah.
2035, all vehicles need to be battery driven. They just passed a law. Now it is being debated heavily, but what is going to happen to trillions of tons, billions of tons of those chemicals? You can't put in the
So balance
water.
has to be found. We cannot simply put the pendulum totally on the other side because ultimately it has to find a balance. Pendulum
Balance.
does stay in one place. You can't push the pendulum on the left, say now it will stay there and everything will be hunky dory. It will not happen because nature takes its own time to recover. And also, when you put reviews, change one poison to another poison, you have to think what to do with that poison.
Yeah. Coming back to the Indo-Pacific push of the U.S. Trump administration, where he has openly supported the Quad initiative to contain China, and it's a good strategy because China has behaved in a way which is not a responsible diplomacy, I would say, mostly. And also their policy of land acquisition by creating an imaginary lines in their own minds against all the 18 countries with which they have disputes across their border. Now, how does it affect peace in that region? Because they are acquiring land in Nepal, they're acquiring land in Bhutan, acquiring land against India, and acquiring land in South China Sea against. Mhm.
History tells us that China does not understand the policy of peace or policy of negotiation or diplomacy. Once they are in a position to dictate them, they will not stop at any place. You know that for their own history tells us that whenever they are in power, they will try to dominate the other regions around their country, and they will try to expand. This is a fact of history. And despite all the disclaimers, we know what they have done in South China Sea. We have seen what they have done in neighboring countries, how they acquired other countries. So the only way out is to be strong and stay strong. The way India has stood up to it now, the way it is now fighting that particular giant now, it's more of a high level intellectual psycho warfare that is going on. But China has realized that it cannot push India anymore. If that happens, and if US also stands up with India and Australia and the entire Japan and the Quad idea, I think that is the only way China can be controlled, because it only understands the language of force, and it cannot dominate the world because others will not react. So the one thing that Trump has done is that he has not given into any kind of namby-pamby ideas. He has come up with the idea. He is supporting the idea, and for that Indians are very happy. Indians also appreciate the Quad idea. We know that we can dominate the seas. We know we can stop this dragon from unnecessarily harassing its neighbors. And China has not won a war for a long time. After 1962, which was an accidental war and won accidentally because Indians were not at all ready and there are some mistakes somewhere. But after that, Vietnam has defeated China, and China has not won a single war, while India has not lost a single war. If you look at the history, if India has not won a single war and China has not won a single war, on what ground China feels that it can dominate India? It is no more the India it was, and it can no more Japan is the way it was after World War II. So Australia may be far off, but Australia has understood that the importance of the seaway. It understands that the importance the way China has treated Australia. So sooner or later it had to happen. Good, it has happened. I think that is the only way to have peace in this area. Otherwise, other peace is to buy peace at the cost of your land, at the cost of your resources. That is the only way. That will not happen. And you cannot buy out a bully. Simply, you cannot buy out a bully. You have to face the bully. So I think that time has come.
American politicians have been very unnerved because of the Indian American community explaining them about 1959 concept. I call it a 1959 concept, where one of their leaders created an imaginary mind of a future China, and they are imposing on India that line, and it has not gone unnoticed. But the way India has stood up, actually India has earned more respect in American political circles, whether it's a Democrat or Republican doesn't matter. And for Americans, for Democrats, I will say, it is important that to understand that if they work against any policies against India, India is going to stand up just the way they did for Pramala Jaipal and these politicians, where the.
And they should remember, after the atomic explosion, India did stand up. India refused to be outdone by USA, and now is a partnership of equals, I would say. So you cannot really cow down India. It has been around for long enough years to face every kind of situation, every kind of adversity. So Democrats also better learn that they are supporting people who are against human rights in Pakistan, who have oppressed minorities in their country, who oppressed the East Pakistan so much it became Bangladesh, and now there are every region is fighting within Pakistan, and they are also having this entire terror export business. And even that, if Democrats still feel they will support Pakistan and Kashmir, and they will support Pakistan, a country which has got biggest, highest, volume of human rights violation, where the minority population has been reduced from 18-20% to 5-6%, or even lesser, maybe 1%. I don't know the current figure. It is totally, opaque. Probably 1% it may be, because either they have been converted or killed or abducted. They are out of Pakistan, and Democrats are supporting them. That is really shows the kind of politics Democrats understand today. Maybe they have lost entire touch of international politics, but to support Pakistan, which has no respect for human rights, the way they oppress their own people, to support them against India shows that there is some huge problem with Democrats. Either the Indian Americans have to make them understand, or this will lead Democrats the wrong way. Traditionally, earlier on, USA used to be anti-India because of Nehru's policies, but that changed after Atal Bihari Vajpayee came up. It changed continuously even within the Congress party, even during Manmohan Singh's. Now to go back to the idea of being anti-India or pro-Pakistan, which has shown its worst behavior in international diplomacy in terms of terrorism, in terms of human rights violation, is something they will be answerable. Indians by tradition, the traditional Indians of America who have been there for a long time, may still support Democrats because of their, traditional loyalty to Democrats, because of typical a little left of the center. But now Democrats are now a little to the center. They are voicing the language of Islam many times, and that is not right, because I don't have problem with Islam. I have problem with the entire geopolitical situation. We loved Obama, but what created worse scenario in Middle East, for example? Can somebody explain? He got a peace award, but after that, the biggest bombing, the most destructive phase of Middle East wars began. And Trump
Em-
has, for all his bombastic style, which people laugh at, he has been able to put UAE and other countries on that side, on the other side with Israel.
no,
So
he's
what
a
brings more peace? So
he's
we have to think anew. We have to think a new paradigm. You cannot live by 1957 or 1950s Cold War theories. I think those are the people who are still, those left who are trying to dictate terms with Democrats, stay within this Cold War saga, still believe in Maoism and still believe in Marxism, which has proved to be a big failure, resulting in millions of lives being lost.
This is the first time in the history of the US presidency in the first 4 years he has not initiated a new war, and I think that
Yes,
shows biggest.
and he has brought adversaries, Saudi Arabia and I think
UAE.
Kuwait, if I'm not wrong, and
Okay.
UAE, unplaceable foes on this side. They would have succeeded in Iran also. Something went wrong. I hope that it gets resolved, because we cannot have a perennial conflict. Turkey was supported, what has come to now. So there are a few mistakes, but then I think America is learning. But Democrats too have to learn that times have changed, and the entire geopolitical situation has changed. They cannot live by old bullets.
Yeah, one of the things, if Democrats come to power, maybe not a good idea right now, but there'll be new wars. That is for sure for the USA. And so, coming back to your new book, from evolution from organization to a movement.
Yeah, that book is RSS, from an organization to a movement.
Movement.
So it will be released on by Indian calendar on Vijayadashmi Day, which will be just about 2-3 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So when I had written RSS 360, many people liked that book hugely, and it has become very popular. It is translated in Kannada. It is translated in Hindi also now. Similarly, my Sangha Swaraj has been translated into 3-4 languages, 4 languages currently. And on this new idea was to have a total worldview of RSS in the 95 years of existence. By the nature of RSS, many people find it very staid, very orthodox organization. But if you look at the way it was in 1925, way it was in 1947-48, the way it evolved over time, fine-tuning its policies, adding new ideas, adding new organizations, adding new dimensions, and fine-tuning its approach to the issues confronting India, the organizational issues, that is very fascinating. You find that it is not a state orthodox organization, but it is an innovative, ever dynamic, ever changing organization, which you have to look very carefully. What I have done is I've chosen the 6 RSS chiefs, what we call Sarsang Chalak, as the reference point. So during that during that time as heading the organization, what changes were brought up, how things change, how they evolve policies, and that is how the entire progress and evolution of RSS, which was highly cadre based, very tightly knit, small organization, which went on to become such a mass movement that now it is present in nearly every vertical of the social segment of India, whether it's education, health, politics, or religion, or tribal areas. Everywhere it is there. Labor field, everywhere. I mean, just you have to keep on saying where it is not. It is there everywhere. Similarly, its expansion in terms of 150,000 social service projects, It is expansion, inspiration taken from RSS, giving to other countries also, doing good for those societies. And this entire idea, it has evolved over time. That is very fascinating. So that is the crux of this book. So it is a step ahead from what I wrote earlier. Earlier book was introducing RSS, various aspects, 360 degree as I call it. But this book is giving a linear historical perspective of this organization, which is supposed to be tightly knit, very closely guarded, secret kind of organization, where today now everybody wants to be interacting with it, everybody wants to know more about it, everybody wants to be associated with the organization in whatever capacity, because they feel this is the vehicle for change, this is the vehicle which can bring change they are looking for. So that fascinating journey is what I've tried to cover in this particular book. It's a huge book because 95 RSS cannot be small. So I think it's about 400 pages or so.
It's a huge book. 400 pages. A writer will know 400 pages takes a lot of time. One of
Despite knowing RSS for so many years, it took me nearly a year to write this book.
no, this is really good stuff. Now, coming back to this new book that you have written, The Evolution, there's so many organizations connected to RSS now. There are all types of social service organizations, Ekal Vidyalay, and other organizations. Do you think that these were the ideas of the later day Sar Sanghchalaks, or these are the earlier ideas?
See, there is a wonderful sentence used by one of the most prominent thinkers of RSS, Dattappan Tengri, who was responsible for growth of ABVP, Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, then Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, Bharatiya Kisan Sangh, Swadeshi movement, what you call Atmanirbhar today. So, very prolific writer and reader and thinker. He said that we can call it progressive, unfoldment of an organization. When Dr. Hedgewar said that Sangha will do nothing, but Swayamsevaks will do everything. So he had a very clear image of what RSS will end up as and where it will reach. But as the organization grew, things kept on adding. So they were logically added, and it was not that some Satsang Chalak took a break from the earlier tradition and created something new. It just added on to whatever was going on. He used that particular strength of RSS and grew on top of that, and something new came up. So you cannot have any breakpoint where suddenly found RSS going in a different direction or taking up a new leap. A new idea comes, somebody agrees. For example, Lekar Vidyalaya was a brainchild of a prachara called Shyam Gupta ji. He seeded, it became a very wonderful idea, and it was adopted by RSS, and then Vishnu Hindu Parishad took it up, independent organizations took it up. So this idea was seeded. So what RSS does, if an experiment succeeds, it is picked up, everybody gives cooperation to that, the person is given manpower, is provided resources, provided help in whatever way possible, it grows. But this progressive unfoldment is the key to RSS growth path and expansion in various fields. And as you know, the best part is that second Sar Sanchalang, for example, created a system which has been standing very strong. It was not such a huge organizational setup in terms of network of so many organizations, though many organizations started during his time, but he created a structure which was so open-ended where new organizations could come in. RSS was strong enough, big enough to keep on adopting new working styles, new organizations without them, without anybody feeling any unhappiness or feeling constrained by it, because each of them is independent, sovereign, doing its own work. It is not controlled by RSS. It is just the idea that has clicked, the idea that has been carried over as a group of people, which has created a new organization. Once you start understanding this approach of RSS, you'll realize why RSS not really split after 95 years. No party can claim to have done that. But it will also be surprising that all the new organizations, of them, 36 have become all India organizations, including mass organizations. And there are hundreds of them which we don't even know. When we sit in a meeting, somebody says that and this and that, we realize something new has come up. So that's the beauty. It's very autonomous, very open structure, very flexible structure, which is for any management guru to study and really get a lot of lessons in organizational science. As Guruji used to say, that we are masters in organizational science. So some management guru will have to study. I am not a management guru. I've just tried to look at it. How our RSS could create such a structure that it went on expanding, kept on adding new dimensions, still it survived, still it thrived, and has been very happy organization where mutually different organizations. There is a labor organization, there is a small scale industry organizations, there is a kisan organization, farmer organization, student organization, which actually have sometimes they can have clashing viewpoints. And if you look at the world view, but they have been able to come together, they've been able to work together, understanding each other's area of work, each area's compulsions of working that area and working according to that area, while carrying on a mutually agreed viewpoint of making this India into a strong, prosperous nation. That is the bottom line on which everybody agrees.
A great point about the way you have studied it, because I have also seen Seva International grow, and it's a remarkable story, success story as well. So, thank you very much, Ratanji, for your time today. And
Thank you so
as
much.
usual, a wealth of information on every single topic, and a great guidance to many people. For those of you who are watching it live, there is a recording of this will be available on YouTube in a week's time. So do watch it again and subscribe. And if you want to know about this book, I'll send you the links of this book, which you can buy, or you can subscribe to this book on Amazon. Thank you, Ratanji.
Thank you, Atilji. Good to have a chat with you.
Same here.